Hey everybody, my name is Tammy Davis and I really appreciate you joining me for today's video. I'm an internationally certified master clinical phytotherapist and aromacologist. Basically that means that I've got a background in pharmacology and aromatherapy, as well as the chemistry of food, basically nutrition, but not necessarily in the way of recommending diets as much as it is understanding the very specific nutrients in foods and how they are used at the cellular level. And in fact, my primary area of focus is on the study of plant constituents and their mechanism of action as it relates to, a mechanism of action and the human genome as it relates to drug development. And the reason that's important is because plant constituents, many of them, especially essential oils, are considered lipophilic chemicals, and what that means is they're fat soluble. They require fat and oil to actually transport them through the body, and they have the ability to influence various genetic functions, as well as the CYP450 liver enzymes. So understanding how these work in the system in relation to medications and other natural remedies is essential in order to optimize our health experience. And in fact, what I do when I understand how these plant constituents work, because nutrients in foods are more just that. They are the nutrients the cells require in order to complete a process. And how I want to say this is that let me just start with this. The internal world is our internal world. The inner systems are in constant communication with the external world. Plus, there's also just the survival of this organism. So there's certain functions that have to occur on a regular basis. So these hormones will actually, they regulate various systems. In the meantime, the body's also, again, like I said, responding to the external world, and that wouldn't be so much of a problem, with the exception of the fact that we have a high level of chemicals in our environment, whether it be heavy metals or xenoestrogens and things like ammonia, like I talked about in my edema video. These are very important chemicals to recognize. There's not much we can do about it overnight, and at the same time, there are some things that we can actually do to better enhance the way the body responds to it. Because keep in mind, nature communicates via chemicals, and our inner nature is in direct communication with the outer nature, and being able to align with that and recognize the fact that the degeneration of health and chronic illness is actually the result of the body working very hard in on our behalf. It's diligently doing what it can to keep us alive. And regardless of how poorly you feel, you have to understand that if you are alive right now, your body has worked really, really hard to keep you alive. And our opportunity now is to begin to shift our perspective and stop seeing the body as defective and dysfunctional. It's not. Disease is not a sign of dysfunction. Dis-ease is a sign of a lack of ease within inside ourselves. It's a lack of order. It's a lack of comfort. We can look at all those dis words and realize that it's just missing. And when we realize that ease is missing and comfort is missing and order is missing, we can begin to align with our body and what it actually needs. And so that is the key element. I'll say it that way. That's the key element to helping the body restore wellness, is actually love. Not just trying to wrap our heads around what I'm saying, but actually coming from a place of love and understanding that love it's a courageous act. I'm going to say it like that. When we can recognize that our systems are functioning to the best of their ability, they are in chronic survival mode. This is what I talk about in my other videos. It's in chronic survival mode. It's in constant high alert. It's also known as the stress response. Part of my work I've been doing this for about 30 years. I started in health and wellness 30 years ago. And over the course of time, I did do specifically work with symptom relief, but I had to get to the point of understanding what in the world is going on. And a few years back, I actually created a program called Breaking the Cycle of Disease Management. Now, since writing that out, I have continued my research and came to discover that the DNA has the ability, it actually has elements called transponal elements, and those transponal elements are segments of the DNA that have the ability to relocate under pressure. So if something is happening outside, it doesn't even have to be something significant, it could just be a slight change of anything, the DNA is constantly changing itself. I'm going to say it that way because this is actually happening prior to conception. So the DNA of the sperm and the DNA of the egg, it all changes. That's the reason why your siblings are not just like you. This is the reason why everybody's different, because the DNA changed prior to the conception, and then the DNA of the sperm and the egg, of course, that created who you are. And the epigenome is, well, you have an epigenome from the time you're born, and pretty much it is kind of mirrors your parents, but not necessarily. Everybody has their own unique system, and your epigenome is going to respond to the environment based on the information that it's getting from the foundational genome. The reason that's important is because my desire here is to really encourage being brave. And I know that may sound silly because so many of us relate to our health issues as problematic and a pain in the butt and frustrating, and some people are inspired to find ways to get through it. And I mean, my hat's off to everybody who's struggling. And at the same time, we have to realize that if we shift our perspective, because we currently, well, like I said, when we're looking at the body the way we do, aside from the DNA factor, let's just take the body the way we collectively look at it right now. We see it as defective and dysfunctional. I mean, that's what we hear when we look at the methylation pathway. People who are getting the methylation test talk about genetic defects, talk about genetic SNPs. These are not defects. They are adaptations that have occurred in response to the environment. Nonetheless, we see it as a problem. And so therefore we go in to try to control it. I know a lot of natural clinicians who are like megadosing on nutraceuticals, all the nutrients that I was talking about earlier that we get from foods. I realize there's a lot of people that would say that our foods are substandard. And so we work really hard to control the body. I mean, we see this with gluten-free, casein-free diets. We see this with sugar-free diets. I mean, it's low fat, no carb. I mean, we see it all over the place. We're really, really trying to control. And this isn't to say that those diets don't provide symptom relief. They absolutely do. They actually help you feel better in the moment, but it's not getting to the root of the issue. And this takes me back to what I have been seeking for very many years, and that is, what is the root of the issue? And that comes back to the stress response. That comes back to the DNA having the ability to adapt, to actually alter itself in response to the environment. This says so much, and I want to parallel this to when we look into the universe, when we look into the galaxy, into outer space, and we are fascinated by the evolution of nebulas and the movement of galaxies and stars and so forth. Some of the things that they talk about is dark energy, and there's just nobody understands what it is. They're trying to wrap their minds around it, and we understand the movement of light. But honestly, everything in outer space moves accordingly to how it's being influenced by whatever energy is out there. Whether it's dark energy, it doesn't make any difference how we want to call it. There's an energy, there's a force that causes this to move. I realize that we can talk to a number of astrophysicists, and they may say it's I don't even want to, you know, I don't even know what they would call it, but there's still a force. And I propose that this dark matter, dark energy is the same dark matter and dark energy. And please forgive me if I'm not referring to these properly, but to me, they become like one and the same. But to me, that force that we see influencing the movement throughout the universe is the same sort of influence that is throughout nature. It is what's, you know, it's in our systems, it's everywhere, it's all throughout nature, and it is what actually moves nature. Nature will adapt accordingly. Nature has no problem moving forward, as we can see with the planets and the stars. And I understand there's also the concern of black holes and the destruction that goes on there, but through destruction there's birth. So there's cycles. This isn't about living in an ideal universe. This is about realizing what is going on. And if we start to, and how do I say, what do I mean by that? Well, realizing that there is something beyond our control that is influencing the activity in the universe. And it's also influencing the activity in nature. It's influencing the activity in our own internal nature. And when we realize that this is what's happening, that we have no control over it. Let me give you a good example, especially if this is your first video of mine that you've seen. Back in the early 1300s, the world was riddled with the Black Plague. Over 70 million people died from the Black Plague. And through the Human Genome Project, a study, they determined that there was an imprint on the major histocompatibility complex, which is your immune system. There was an imprint that actually saved the rest of the population. We are here because somebody in our bloodline survived the Black Plague. And that's because the immune system was altered as a result of the exposure of this illness, okay? And this imprint remains today. They can still see evidence of it. Now, my proposal is, number one, that we've had the advancement of so much technology over the years that there's no wonder we have so many different diseases, and they've also been able to identify that, you know, the immune system is pretty diverse, meaning yours is very different from mine, and so it's very difficult to even try to use things that are, you know, just kind of umbrella remedies for the immune system. But aside from that, the real significant point to this is that that change happened without any human influence. We did nothing. There was no medication administered. There was nothing. It just happened. There were no vaccinations administered. It just happened. And so that's the point to all of this. That's the point to why that's the reason I use the universe as a reference. That there is a force that influences the activity throughout the universe, whether it be our internal universe or the external universe. There is a force that influences all activity that we have no influence over. So our option is to see this force as brutal and trying to take us out, or we can recognize that it's just a movement. It is just an unstoppable force, and that's where I come in to love. Because loving something enough to see the positive takes courage. When we say, I'm going to do something, you know, I love myself, but I'm going to do all this stuff over here to control this, that's fear-based. And again, this takes a lot to be able to say, I love myself enough to find ways to bring stability to the system and align with our nature, actually align with nature and work alongside it. That's the gift that we have to the level of awareness that we have. I don't know if that made any sense, but what I'm saying is, as a human being, we have a high level of an awareness that we have the ability to recognize that there's more going on here, and that if we stopped trying to force things and align, this isn't to say that we don't take action. You absolutely take action, but you take action in a way that creates stability. You see, all of this chronic stress response or survival mode or high alert, the body is consistently seeking balance. That's what it's trying to do. Balance, truthfully, is very relative. So when we talk about restoring balance to the body by all rights is already balanced based on the messages coming in. And like I said, there's plenty of lipophilic chemicals in our environment that will influence our cellular activity. And when that happens, there's no longer the use of nutrients changes. So not only does the signal not only is it a different signal coming in, it's also the nutrients that are selected for use now change. And basically the body, like I said, is just responding to its environment. And if we want to override that, first it's going to take having the courage to see this through loving eyes and looking for the positive. We can say, I don't like this. I don't like what's going on. And I understand why. I understand that there is so much around me in the foods, in the air, in the water, you name it, and the cleaning products. There's so much around me. I understand why my body's doing this. I mean, understanding is the first step. Understanding, it takes courage to try to understand. Even if you don't fully understand everything that's causing your issues, all we have to do is understand that our body has been working very diligently to keep us alive. That's the first thing. And that takes a lot of courage. And if you're in that space, it's called love. And the reason I want to share this with you, let me see here. Sorry, I got a strange text message, but I wanted you to see this. I started reading this book. Can you see that? I'll put a link in this, and this is on Kindle, and this is on Amazon, but I put it on my Kindle, and it's $9.99. But I absolutely swear, this book needs to be read by everybody. I mean, this woman, decades of couples work. She's a professor, teaches a class called Marriage 101, but she's put this book together, and it has, I think, 20 exercises in it, and I decided to read it about myself, because I have who I am, and I would love to explore a deeper sense of self-love. And I've been looking at being positive, not from a Pollyanna perspective, but just really kind of beginning to see things from a point of understanding. But there's my own emotional, baggage, so to speak, can get in the way. And so that's the reason why I recommend that book. It's very good for your relationships, but the whole premise of this book is being able to love yourself bravely enough to be able to look at yourself objectively and go, wow, I see what I was doing, and being able to love yourself through it, having the courage to make changes, for as difficult as it may be, in order to be a better partner. And to me, again, it's about couples work, but it's bigger than that. Truthfully, it's bigger than that. I mean, a lot of us are focused on our relationships, and they are important. And then we have our friendships, and we have our children, a relationship with our children and our coworkers and so forth. And being able to see things through objective, understanding eyes is a big step to loving bravely. And so it doesn't just need to be read for anyone just looking to seek a better relationship with their partner. This could be for any reason, and in fact, I think it's highly recommended even for healthcare, because it takes a lot to love ourselves bravely enough. It takes a lot to be able to love this world as it is. Again, I wish we could change it overnight and create more of an ideal environment, but we don't have that to our advantage. So there are things that we can do. And so loving ourselves enough to make the changes and to begin to see that the conditions that we're living with are a result of the body working really hard on our behalf. I know I keep repeating myself, but that's a really important component. It's working. It's not dysfunctional. It's not defective. It's working. It's functioning and doing the best that it can to maintain a degree of balance. Earlier I mentioned helping to restore stability. That's the most important piece that we can bring in. When we align with, when we recognize that the body is doing the best that it can and what it needs is stability, that's when we can bring in the essential oils. Again, I've talked about nutrition and diets, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and I recognize and appreciate the diets that we have available to us. And what I propose here is not necessarily something that it's not everybody's cup of tea. But if this sounds like something that resonates with you and is something that you are more interested in doing, then let me know. The essential oils are a big component to that, because again, when we're talking about diet and nutrition, they only work so far. I mean, I know many people who change their diets and they go and they try all these different things and they still have challenges, or the health continues to get worse. Yes, I understand there's symptom relief, but it's not getting to the root of the issue. And the root of the issue is the alteration that's occurring, and the root of the issue, truthfully, is the way the body's reacting to the environment. And changing your diet is not going to fix that. I'll give you a good example. The angiotensin II receptor becomes activated under times of stress. That is what pumps up our blood pressure. Okay, that angiotensin II, when that receptor gets activated, it actually, and you'll have to forgive me. I think it's the DDPF4. I'll have to put that in the description box to clarify which gene it is. But that particular gene is used to break down gluten and casein. Gluten and casein are proteins, and so that particular gene complex metabolizes those two proteins further. Believe it or not, there's actually a casein receptor as well. But when the angiotensin II receptor is activated, that particular gene is deactivated. Which means there's some fluctuation that needs to happen, which means because obviously if the angiotensin II receptor is consistently activated, the blood pressure stays up. So this is a sign that the autonomic nervous system has activated this, and so now there's a stress response happening, and therefore the body's no longer breaking down those two particular proteins effectively. That would be during a very stress, like fight or flight situation, okay? But technically that's supposed to be reversed, and the angiotensin II receptor eventually turned deactivated. Many people don't have that happen, and as we know, because they're taking medications for high blood pressure, and they have to stop eating gluten and they have to stop eating casein in order to feel better. But the thing is it doesn't ever get rid of the blood pressure issues, because if they were to stop taking the medication, they're still going to have a high blood pressure. So this is the part that I'm getting at, is like we have to get to the root of the problem. And so the nutritional changes that are made aren't going to be enough. They're effective in the moment, but long-term, they're not enough. And so if what you're looking for is long-term, then we need to talk. And this is really especially important for our kids. And the more we learn this as adults, we can begin to teach this to our children and in turn give them a better, healthier future. So there's the argument for essential oils, because like I mentioned a while ago, essential oils are lipophilic, as are the chemicals in the environment, as are our hormones and such. So nature has a way of recognizing nature, which means it will override, it will pick up the natural chemicals first before it will allow an artificial or a man-made chemical to influence it, which I find is interesting. It's very, very fascinating about nature, but nature does absolutely recognize nature. This is something that scientists have determined since, I believe it was the 19th century, like the late 1800s. So for this reason, and there's another reason why you don't want to mix mindlessly essential oils and medications, because you can cause problems, whether it be at the actual genetic receptor or on the liver enzymes. So recognizing how these are going to all work together is, again, absolutely necessary. I will say that I was asked this the other day by somebody online. I still do make custom blends. I've changed my website a little bit so it's not advertised on there, but just know, and I am doing a lot of education, and my Facebook group, Synergescence, it's closed because I would like to get personal, and I'm happy to help guide you if you already are working with oils. But if you would like custom formulated blends, I do that. Just go into my website, click on, if you land on the landing page, just click on Learn More, and then scroll down to the bottom, and you can hit me up there, and we can start a conversation about that. But that said, that's the reason why I really like the essential oils, because, again, they when they are authentic and genuine, that's an important component to keep in mind. They should say authentic and genuine on the label. If you're getting them from a store or a seller. But you want them to be authentic and genuine, and they will override the xenoestrogens, and they will actually help the body, and there's ways to do this, help the body to produce the antioxidants that keep us, help us to convert ammonia, eliminate, so that it can be eliminated from the body or used as it's needed. It actually helps the body to chelate metals from the blood. So there's a good, and there's a whole lot of goodness to the essential oils. And but again, when we use them in conjunction with bio-individual dietary suggestions, and I use that word because not everybody's body is in the same place, okay? So there's certain things that are going on with you that are going to have certain dietary suggestions, and that's along the lines of more specific foods. I realize here I talk about some supplements like magnesium, but I do talk about the maca and the cacao. Those are superfoods, and the spirulina. Those are foods that the body can fully use. And when you pair it with oils that are designed specifically to help stabilize your system, that is where, pardon me for saying this, that's where the magic happens. This is where you actually begin to find the results. I get asked an awful lot, how long do I have to live on the oils? And, one thing I used to say when I worked in dentistry, because I didn't mention that earlier, but I have worked in dentistry, and I was doing a lot of my research while I was working in dentistry, we used to say floss the teeth you want to keep. So I say use the oils for as long as you want to help your body remain stable, because under no circumstances are we going to be out of this environmental mess at this point. So helping to stabilize the internal environment is really our job if we want to have a healthy and slow the progress of these degenerative diseases. It bothers me so much that we're raising our children to believe that they have to grow old and get sick. That men at a younger age are experiencing lower testosterone levels. I'm going to do a whole podcast on this with regards to the chemistry of our body. But the fact is that if we learn to recognize and appreciate our body for what it's done for us, then we can begin to align with its needs and not try to control it. Yes, there are some things that we're going to have to try to improve upon short term, but long-term results are really, I think, what we're all after. And so how long do you have to live on the oils? Well, I'd say, you may not need as many in the future, but keeping some around to help keep your system stable and understanding how to use them in that process is a really important component. And to me, it would be more cost effective in the long run, instead of having to down a lot of pills all the time, whether we're taking supplements or what have you. So on that note, I'm going to leave you with loving yourself, loving bravely, being able to love the way the world is. And I know that's hard. I realize it's hard because we've been trained, so to speak, for some reason, as a human species, we see the negative, and it's difficult to see the positive. And so, regardless of what's happening around us, if the only positive thing we looked at was the fact that we're still alive, and we can appreciate our body for doing what it took to bring us to have this day, that's a courageous point to start in. And if that's all it did every single day, that's all you did until you finally made a decision on how you wanted to go about helping to stabilize your system so that you can experience a higher degree of wellness, that's good. But just appreciating your body for keeping you alive is a great step. That is loving bravely. And the more we just accept what is, not because we're being complacent, but because we recognize that this is what we have right now, and we can build on it, we can make improvements, but let's not try to force things. This can be a really great conversation. But so anyway, loving bravely is the key element to helping the body restore wellness. And incorporating essential oils and pairing them with very specific dietary suggestions is really the best way I know how to, because you know why? Oils awaken the body's wisdom. That just makes me think of, I was in a yoga class recently, and the focus of that class was seek refuge in love. And because when we seek refuge in love, we awaken the wisdom of the body. And that's the reason why I say oils. If we can seek refuge in love and understand that we are alive because our body has done everything it could to get us to this point, and allow the oils to awaken the wisdom of the body, now we are on to something. And so, yeah, join me in Facebook, on that Facebook group. It's a closed group, so I'd have to, you can request to join, or I can send you I'll put the link in the description box. You can also find me at synergessence.com, like I said, if you're interested in custom blends for yourself. I also have a podcast. That link is in the description box below as well, and you're always invited to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at TammyDavis8, and on both. So anyway, I appreciate you joining me. I look forward to your questions, and here's to loving bravely and awakening the body's wisdom.